I'm Laurence Edwards, and I'm a sculptor residing in Suffolk, Butley Mills Studios on the Creek, and I principally work in bronze, have my own foundry, and I share and run a studio set up here with about 13 other artists. Yeah, they're very I'm very close to them. They're very sort of personal statement, really, and it's very rare that you get the opportunity to sort of make a statement in landscape and and use landscape with your work. And basically, they're three at the moment. They're an ongoing project, but they're 3 8-foot figures in bronze that have been made from the materials of the landscape. So they've been made really with mud from the marsh and all the reeds around here, etc. And ostensibly, they are one figure that has evolved. So one big clay man or mud man was made, and then a mould was made of him. He was cast into bronze, and then the clay that was left was turned into the next man. And he was bronzed, and the next man came out of that. And the interesting thing about that is that a physiognomy and a sort of a build stayed with these figures, and they end up looking related. And it's something I stupidly hadn't really thought about, making almost an indigenous person, I suppose, or a person that sort of relates to landscape. And a physiognomy and an eye, and a way that they stand, a way they look, in triplicate, gave them a presence and a power. And they started to tie in with ideas of history of this place, the sort of whole Saxon history that we have here, and also the contemporary world that we exists here as well. The music that exists. On one side of me, on the left-hand side, is a concert hall, an international concert hall, started by Benjamin Britten, and on the right-hand side is Sutton Hoo, and in the middle is this creek. And I like to think of myself in between those two places. So to position myself in a landscape in that way, sort of metaphorically or intellectually or whatever you want to call it, has given me a real anchor to this landscape, and the fact that I come from here as well really helps. But basically it was how was I going to tie in that idea, and how was I going to use a landscape and turn the landscape and make the connection good, proper and seen and obvious. I decided to make a raft and almost like a little island, it's a little piece of Suffolk almost, and transfer and sail these figures up the rivers. And I decided to make a journey to the concert, to the festival last year. So they sailed up the river from Aldborough to Snape on a big symbolic voyage, and they were positioned outside the concert hall in the reeds, floating on the tide. So they raised and lowered with the tide. So they were in real concert with excuse the pun, in concert with the landscape, where they were almost like barometers that chronicled the weather, the conditions, the tidal heights, etc. So they really fused with the landscape in a really interesting way for me, and gave me a lot to work with. And out of that, films were made, and we made a book which seemed to record the project, and it was wonderful. Because I had a big commission, I didn't know whether I could do it. I thought I'd try and figure out first in this scale with my foundry, which is a very small foundry. They were cast in 12, 13, 14 pieces and welded together. And because of that, they became like a piece of personal archaeology, because they were so destroyed and then reconstructed. I was almost destroying myself and then reconstructing myself in bronze in a funny sort of way. And that journey, because they were really about me and for me, was quite extraordinary, because it was a breakdown of a person and a building up of a person at a certain time of life, all that sort of stuff. And then this journey through a landscape which I really wanted to not claim, but I wanted to let it be known that I cared about it. It was a voyage of it was an arrival in many, many ways for me, and it was reaching a plateau in a life or a level which I felt like, it's great to have really engaged with a piece of landscape on a personal level. And as you say, to return back to working professionally as a sculptor after that, with commissions and stuff, which are brilliant and great fun to do, it's slightly dimmed in all that experience in a funny sort of way. But again, to look at it in a more positive way, it forces me to be confident enough to put more of myself into the commission work that I do. So I think as a result of that, my work and the galleries and the work that I work with probably feel a much more confident artist coming out, a much more person who's much more happy to talk about himself and put himself forward, I think. So that's what it's done for me. I think I've crossed the Rubicon. Literally.